Again, my privilege to introduce to you a I use the program language came with the personal rigor. I'm looking for an academic rigor that goes along with her very, very already dynamic person. Created a grand project, and I hear you keep starter, you already got 55,000 or some money. Celebrity. See how she knows how to handle capital natural. Capital is amazing to see. Navigate through the academic thing about Tibet. It's about their ecological regeneration. But I'm working with her and a committee, an amazing committee of to get the academic language so that she's in conversation with the education people. And a fascinating professor in gender and narrative in communication. And then Meg found every phenomenon was how forests think, trained in Paris, France, and then we had a and then Helena Norberg Hirsch, who many of you have known, who is one of my inspirations, who wrote the book called Ancient Future. They will tell us about how in such a nomadic community in Tibet, we can conduct a participatory, not only participatory, but collaborative research that the benefit of all the knowledge created will be given back to
the So to start off, if you all feel comfortable closing your eyes, if we could just visualize water. Now what comes up here may be an external experience of water, but we may also recognize that our own bodies are mostly made up of water. So this experience may be internal or external. Now if we can think of the water that we've consumed, or the water that we have benefited from, used throughout this day already. Recognizing that it's not even noontime, and recognizing how much benefit we have gained from the water of this world. And now, just coming to a place of gratitude for that water. How even though we're in the middle of Arizona, even though it doesn't make much sense to have water, we've all had access to water here today. Just filling our hearts with gratitude for that access, for our privilege, and for that gift. And with that gratitude, I want to start this presentation today about my work in Tibet. As you can see here, I'm going to flash some numbers up at first, even though I'm not too into numbers, and you'll get that by the end of this presentation. But it is pretty impressive that 75% of our world is composed of water. Only 1% of that water is drinkable. Most of Tibetan glaciers hold the drinkable water for Asia. Tibet, for this reason, is considered the third pole, because its glaciers hold the most drinking water after the two other poles. 1 in 5 humans drink the water from those glaciers. So in that way, Tibet becomes a very precious resource. So this is where I work. This is the Tibetan Plateau. It is politically only considered Tibet in a small portion of this area, but what I'll be talking about, being Tibet, will be the Tibetan region that is a lot larger than what is politically mapped out on the map. So Tibetan nomads have been protecting this water for centuries. So what I'll be sharing today is the traditional ecological knowledge that these Tibetan nomads hold. We'll journey to the source of the Mekong River and down its banks. I'll be recording the stories of the region and of the people in this region. And the May in Mekong stands for mother. So this is how the people in this region consider the rivers. It is within the name of the river that they hold the utmost respect for this source of life. So this is my dissertation proposal. It's now named Perspectives from the Roof of the World, Tibetan Nomadic Perceptions of Climate Change. My research questions have evolved over time, but firstly I want to look at how do the stories told by Tibetan nomads of the Zato River Basin reflect their perspectives on climate change. Now, you'll notice the name change between the rivers. Mekong is the name that is mostly marked on the maps. It's the name that is used in Southeast Asia for the river. And in Tibet, the Tibetan name for the river is Zato. So I'll be looking around the source of the Mekong River, which in that area is considered the Zato, about the perspectives on the river. So I want to find out if the nomads of eastern Tibet are experiencing any ecological changes. Because in the years that I spent there, from 2005 to 2008 when I lived in Tibet, most of the stories that people shared with me were about the land. And often those stories would be about the changes that they were experiencing. So when I came here to Prescott, I did not expect to be asking these questions. But it made so much sense after the past 3 years to turn back to these conversations that were the most typical conversations that I was having in Tibet to research them, because those are the issues that are coming up most for the people that I'm working with and for. So when talking about these experienced ecological changes, I want to understand more what is being experienced and how the perspectives on ecological change in terms of the causes and the effects work with their ideas of the future. So we'll get into more how the worldview of the Tibetan nomads really dovetails with the scientific perspectives of climate change. So when we talk about ecological changes in the region, most of the issues have been in extremely heavy rainfall. When I came here to Prescott 3 years ago, I was coming off the plane from a trip to Tibet that had a bunch of surprises within it. I arrived at this village that I had lived at for almost 4 years, and I was there to deliver money and some services to one of the school projects that my nonprofit, the Pure Land Project, works on. And I had a group of 8 students from Prescott College and with me to do service learning there. And we arrived in the village, and all of a sudden, we noticed the school is destroyed. I was like, oh, guys, you didn't fill me in. I know there's no phone, but it would have been cool to know that the school was destroyed. But it just happened a few days before we arrived. there were heavy rains that had never been experienced before, and the foundation of the school building was swept away by water. So it was in that experience that we were talking a lot about the shift in climate and how they were experiencing it, because it directly impacted the schools that I was working with. So in talking about these heavy rains, we started talking about who is reporting the changes and who's concerned about who these impacts are affecting. So mostly when I speak with people about the changes in climate, it's mostly older people. So I'm also asking, how are youth responding to this? Are they concerned? And really seeing who climate change is going to impact the most here. And lastly, I really want to know how the source of the Mekong, so how the Zato River, is understood by the Tibetan people. And what does preservation mean to the people in Zato? Because there are many efforts by the government, by the Chinese government, to protect this region. And there are different organizations working with Tibetans around Tibet to try and preserve this region, because it's getting to be known for its rich resources. And I think it's really important when we speak about preservation to find out what the people living in the area actually think of preservation. Those are my research questions. We'll move on to what is already there in the literature around these pieces and why I want to be asking those questions. Mainly want to be asking those questions because the voice of the Tibetans seems to be missing in the literature. There's a lot of literature about Tibet. And there's a ton of literature around global warming. Most of that literature does point to the fact that due to its geographical region, due to its elevation, Tibet is heating up really fast, twice as fast as the global average. And so the glaciers are melting at an alarming rate. And it's just very connected to other regions. So people from 12 different countries are dependent on Tibet's water. And so this links to preservation, what we're going to need to work on to make sure that that water source continues to be a source of life. And traditionally, Tibetans, even today, have highly respected water and have a very deep relationship with the resource. So from different writers, I've looked into the literature on animism, and especially Bon, because Bon is the religion that, or the worldview that was prevalent before Tibetan Buddhism, before Buddhism became Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet, and something that really influences most nomadic relations with the earth still today. So that animist system is mainly where the traditional ecological knowledge is held, and I think it's really important, related to the global warming, that those systems of knowledge aren't always systems of conservation. They're relationships. So it goes in a different way than most scientists or politicians would speak about conservation or preservation. And I think it is really important, especially when speaking about Tibet, which is a very highly politicized issue, which I am staying far from. I'm also really careful that the belief that indigenous people are simply the victims and cannot solve the environmental crisis that they face is one of the most erroneous views. So lots of people say, oh, especially in conversations about indigenous people who have not had a high rate of literacy or, scientific knowledge, there's a lot of, efforts to conserve their resources. And these are conservation efforts that are imposed on these people who actually hold some of the best knowledge of how to live in relation with the earth. But it's not written up in the laws, it's not, made into a map. So I think that's a very important part of the literature that I've already reviewed. And then the last bit is how I'm going to be working with all of this knowledge. And that's through mindful inquiry. And I really thank Joan and Denise and Noelle for bringing me to these methods. And mindful inquiry was something that got me so excited when I first heard about it. It gave me a big release because finally I found a way that I felt an ethical way to approach research, and something that really resonated with me personally, trying my hardest to be a practitioner of mindfulness, and working with a community that has taught me so much about mindfulness. I felt that this was a really appropriate technique to be using, especially when trying to capture the energy and the voice of water. So just a little bit about what is already known about the region. Like I said, Tibet is known to be the water tower of Asia, holding most of its glaciers. Where I'll be working is right here in Tibet. It is about an altitude of 4,200 feet in most of the areas, and so it is where 7 major rivers are sourced. This is the place where I'll be next month. It is moving time. So these are the folks that I work with, my friends, and their lovely animals that they subsist with. So I'm so happy that Jeremy and Shauna went before me because they explained the play-space and the animal relations. But a lot of my work is about human-animal relation and about human relation with place. So like I said, a lot of laws have already been created about the preservation of this region. There's wetland conservation, wildlife conservation, forest conservation going on. I live in a protected area, and that's where some of the research has already been conducted and will continue to be. And there are many issues with the preservation of regions, but the main thing is that the preservation techniques are not in line with nomadic life. So those yak that you saw being herded, they are being herded kind of like illegally at this point. The government has requested that in order to protect the forest and the water, that these animals be fenced in. And there are numerous cultural implications of those kind of laws. And then also ecologically, it creates a lot of degradation of the land. Lots of erosion happens from so many hooves pounding a small area of a mountain. So it's an issue that there's not enough communication happening between the nomads and policymakers, and that's what my work is really aimed at. So exploitation in China is thought of as a great thing. We use the term negatively, but it's, using resources. They find, hydroelectric power is amazing, but they are damming a lot of rivers. This is my research map on the Zato River. So the red line is the research place, and the blue line is the river. I will be walking along the banks of the river and using walking as a technique of listening The Kampas are the people that I'll be working with. They are mostly semi-nomads. They learn from a very young age how to live in close relation with the earth. These young women were harvesting mushrooms for our dinner. The Tibetan nomads are mostly Buddhist, but like I said, their human nature and human-animal connection are mostly with fun or animist background. And those relations with the earth and the animals are extremely close, and that will be the main topic of my dissertation. So my methodology, I'll be using a mindful inquiry approach to ethnographic field study, looking at phenomenology, their experience of the land and the animals, environmental ethnography, really listening to the river, participatory observation. I've already lived there for quite a few years, but this summer I'll be staying in the tents with the nomads, walking with them, going with them to graze the animals. And narrative research is, hopefully, I'm just going to be a way for Tibetans to tell their stories, the nomads to get their writings out there. And using video ethnography, so I've already handed out some cameras. This winter, I handed out 5 video cameras, and we'll be taking the footage from those videos for a year. And this is the co-research model that I'm very excited about, getting the Tibetans to really develop their own stories. This was an issue for me because bringing in technology to the area is on the edge of what is appropriate, what is not. But this technology is coming in very quickly. Everybody has iPhones now in the area. And so they were excited to get video cameras. And within my dissertation, I'll be hyperlinking to the videos so they can actually show their story. And this was in December. Me teaching one of my friends how to use the video camera. And she was extremely excited about it. And she took us on a journey to go get water with her. And so all these videos are also going to be uploaded to the website that I'll show you at the end of this. But they'll be displaying their transfer of knowledge. She was even showing the younger girl with her on that video how she goes to get the water. The dissertation, like I said, will show how the traditional ecological knowledge dovetails with the scientific knowledge, and especially the communication with the Nagas. So I'm out of time, but a big part of my dissertation is actually the view and listening to the water spirits, who are called Nagas. And then looking at the rules of land versus the laws of the government. Like the Nagas, as I talk about with human-earth relations, the Nagas have different laws about extracting minerals, cutting trees, damming rivers, how livestock is used on the mountains, building roadways and agriculture. The Nagas, the water gods, will have different reactions to any of those things being done. And then, the laws, the police that are out in the area will also have different reactions to those things being done. But it's interesting seeing the crossover of those relationships. So my methods changed. I did a pilot study last summer, and I found that I can't do individual interviews. It doesn't work with clan-like people. So everything is switched over to focus groups, which is really exciting because it's very natural. And the snowballing technique is very easy because one clan tells the other clan, hey, she's got, stuff to talk about. And people love talking about rivers, and that's what most Tibetan songs are about. So it's really great to just go hang out and listen to stories. So my timeline, I already did some research, like I said, last summer. The spring before that, I was designing the IRB. I collected data into that and completed the dissertation proposal. Had that committee meeting, and here I am presenting, and then I'll be from August, actually from June probably, I'll be collecting data in Tibet, writing it up, hopefully in the fall around there, and then next year, hopefully. So for all of that, I hope that you guys can come and visit the website, journey with me, and see some more videos. These are the kids that I work with. Like I said, their songs and dances are all related to the environment. This is one of their dances about birds. And this is my website, and my nonprofit that works along the same issues is the Pure Land Project, so please do follow along on Facebook. Instagram will get going, and big thanks to my chair, Hamod, and to committee members, and yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I'm just curious about your background and what led you to Tibet. Your childhood, your adulthood, your family.
I mean, I always thought I was adopted because I grew up in a place where people were like extremely white, and they'd ask me like, "Where are you from? What are you?" And I'd be like, "I don't know." Even though I'm part Mexican and I should know, like I'm gonna look a little different for that. But yeah, I grew up thinking I was adopted from Asia, and just kind of stuck with that. And and my interest got into Tibet. I got really sucked into Tibetan Buddhism like real quick, and it's actually something that brought me to Prescott because my teacher center is right here. So yeah, Tibetan Buddhism. Adam Yauch had a big part to play in it, honestly, too. That whole Beastie Boy thing with Tibet. Yeah.
Just a quick question. What's your fluency and how are you communicating, asking questions? And
So I used to be a lot more fluent when I was living there. I'm hoping to get back into it this summer. I had trained in classical Tibetan, thinking I'd be a translator early on in Nepal and India with the Tibetans in exile. And then when I moved to Tibet, it's a totally different dialect. It's like street language. And so now when I communicate with Tibetans here or other places, they're like, I talk like a gangster. But like, you know, like that's what nomadic language is like. It's very direct and maybe inappropriate, but it's something that I learned while I was living there and something that I get back fluency with. But I do work with a translator, and I do consider him a co-researcher, along with all the participants. You know, who, I mean, they're the ones telling the stories and making the video recordings. But yeah, the translator Jem Young, he's been incredible, and he visited the people with me before this was even a research project, and he also comes from a different area, but he got that dialect down, and so he's doing all the interviews with me.
Thank you, Meg. Is this on? So the project's amazing. I mean, it's cool work. So I'm just wondering, where are you going long term? Like, what comes after your dissertation?
Right. So we were talking last night at dinner how this is a larger, piece of my life. It's so it is like an action research piece because I was in this area before. I mean, it emerged. The Pure Land Project, my nonprofit, emerged from just conversations with the community, and then this research project really emerged out of that. Even though I was really set on looking at the schools, they were like, eh. So looking at water is really something that's become my passion now because it's so important to everybody. So my hope is that this will turn into a book, some articles, whatever, and that I'll be able to go to more climate change meetings mostly held in Beijing and Shanghai, and be part of that conversation, bringing co-researchers to the table and really discussing this as part of, policy, because China is really doing amazing things in environmental protection, and this is a topic of conversation, but it's just bringing all the voices together to the table and making sure that everybody understands that it's not a conflict to have traditional ecological knowledge and scientific knowledge. It's pretty much the same. Even though it sounds wild that, I'm writing about water spirits, and, it may be looked down upon in lots of academic circles, like where I came from at Penn, to say I believe in water spirits, and I'm trying to record the voices or the experience of it. It needs to be at the table, because that's who lives in this region. And so my goal is to become part of that conversation, work on expanding the Pure Land Project, and if it emerges, create centers of sustainability like Helena has done in Ladakh, and work with her and other mentors and people that have already done great work, and try and set up more communication and more resources for people to protect what they love.
I think you kind of already answered my question, but I was wondering about that piece of making this information afterwards available in Asia. But conference, you kind of already have mapped out the conferences and all of that.
Well, that covers people that do conferences.
Right.
I mean,
So I'm wondering how the policy changes.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I do plan on sharing it out in Asia in that way. Hopefully with John Young, who's like super fluent and everything, but that would, translate it to Chinese and be by my side for this. But the main thing is, to me, sharing it with the Tibetan nomads, like sharing the videos back, because these videos are taken in all along the river. These are places that the Tibetans don't visit themselves. So I do want to, besides just hyperlinking the video into my dissertation on the website, I do want to share out with the Tibetans who are contributing the other Tibetan videos, so that there is more conversation about, different people having different relations with the water and what they're doing to protect it. One of the most interesting conversations came on my ride to the hospital after breaking my neck this winter in Tibet. The driver told me the story of how they had an uprising in his place this past summer. That of course wasn't in the news, but about mining in his region, because they were worried about it disrupting the water. And so it was an amazing story that, other Tibetans hadn't heard. And of course, being very sensitive to the political climate in the area. But what happens with the environment, it can be politicized, but it can also break all those political boundaries. These people actually, when confronted with the government about uprising against miners, they decided, well, they're already pressing us for saying we're separatists, and we're going to be, our protest is not anything anybody should pay attention to, because we're trying to separate from China. So what these people did was they printed out pictures of Mao Zedong, and they held them, and they also waved the Chinese flag. They showed them that they're not being separatists, they are protecting their land and their lives. It's nothing like, along the political lines. It's about the earth. And so that was a really powerful conversation that came out of an accident. But I want to make sure that those stories are heard by other Tibetans, making sure that this conversation is had.